Good morning, Ambassador. You are no doubt observing this very, very carefully. Could we just start by explaining why these elections are so significant?
They are significant because we have this year 3 regional elections in East Germany, and they will be one of the major tests before we have general elections September next year.
And are these particular states very significant because they're populous or because they are, if you like, a weather vane? Or is it simply that they're a pointer to what might happen next year?
No, I think they are, somehow they represent obviously a trend which we are seeing not only in Germany but all over Europe. You just had the senator from the US speaking about the division within his country. We see a growing discontent, and this discontent, what the Prime Minister called snake oil populism, is everywhere. And it's reflected now in these state elections in East Germany. And as your colleague rightly said, we might see for the first time, let's wait for the results, but we might see it for the first time, a far-right party winning a state election. But Trevor, I think it's very important to underline, in German politics, we have what we call a firewall. Firewall means nobody cooperates with the far right. So they will not gain power. They will be isolated. It will not be easy to form a coalition around them. But this is definitely the willingness of the other parties.
I want to come back to that in a second, but I wonder if you could just explain. I mean, these people they're not compelling people to vote for them. What is the appeal here? Is it what Siobhan was talking about, purely the issue of migration and so on, the 2015 migration from the Middle East?
First, I would say it's not a phenomenon only of East Germany. We have the AfD also in Western Germany, but they are stronger in the East. And there are some phenomena which have to do, for example, with 40 years of communism, that people don't feel as affiliated as in the West to the traditional parties. We have problems in rural areas. We have a sentiment of migration, which many feel is too strong. Criminality has increased. So there are many factors which are feeding in to this sentiment. The war in Ukraine, the cost of living crisis, all of this is creating a feeling that the life has become more complicated, that maybe the situation of their sons and daughters will not be as good as their own situation. So all of that feeds in. But we should not forget, more than half of the people don't vote the extremes because they know that politics is complicated and requires long-term solutions. And this is the day-to-day fight we need to have.
You spoke of this firewall. Well, actually, I think they tried this to some extent in France against Le Pen. They tried it in the Netherlands. One has to say that actually the tactic seems to fail because parties like the AfD are in government in Sweden, in Italy. In fact, they run the government in Italy, Denmark, and probably will be in the Netherlands. Is there a danger that the lineup of, let's call it, the traditional, conventional parties simply emphasizes the message from these radical right parties? You see, they're all against you, the people. They're not listening to you, and they are going to all get together simply to stop your voice being heard.
Now, my personal feeling is we should stop, calling the voters neo-Nazis. These are people who protest with their vote. So we have to take this serious, and we have to try to address that. And, Trevor, we just had some days ago a very successful visit of the Prime Minister to Berlin. They spoke about an action plan.
Minister.
Yes, about the British Prime Minister in Berlin, action plan on migration. But he spoke also about this snake oil populism, and we have to deliver. I think delivery is the key issue. How can we win back the protest vote? Only by delivery. And this is what needs to be strengthened. And I would put this really in the broader context of the reset of the United Kingdom in its relationship towards the European Union. It's about Ukraine, it's about our bilateral relationship, but it's also about strengthening delivery.
Well, one of the things that people have been talking about in that relationship is the question of mobility. And one of the discussions that seems to be taking place in the background is whether it might be possible to introduce some sort of mobility scheme for young people so that young people can come from Germany, can come to work here for a period, and our young people can go to Germany to work for a period. Where are we on that? Is there actually a conversation going on about that? Is it something that Germany would favour?
I would say all the 27 countries of the European Union would favour that. And I get very positive feedback also in this country that many young people feel that this is something that through Brexit has been taken away from them. The possibility to live and to work in the European Union, to study there. And we would like to make that possible. But Trevor, I think very, very important that this is not mixed up in any way with migration policy or with freedom of movement. These would be relatively small numbers of people, of young people who would stay for a limited amount of time. Well, and we want to make this possible, yes.
Well, this is an issue, isn't it? Because our Prime Minister, when he was asked about this week, seemed to put the dampener on it because he doesn't want anybody to think that we're reintroducing labour mobility by the back door. Do you think actually such a thing could be made possible in practice?
Yeah, but I must say I agree with the Prime Minister. It's definitely not the intention to have freedom of movement through the back door. I think it can be done. Let's wait now. The next step will be the Prime Minister meeting the Commission President von der Leyen. We will have a new commission towards the end of the year, and then we will start talking about it, about a broad range of issues where we think that a reset is not only possible but necessary.
The last point, I just wanted to come back to the AfD. I mean, one of the features that we've seen is that perhaps these parties don't get into government, but what they do is perhaps change the position of the conventional parties. And we've seen in recent days a hardening of the centre-right CDU party and probably the German government. Is a real issue here that the advance of these parties will change the policy of the mainstream parties?
There is an element of that, Trevor. I would not deny that. But, you know, we also had a terrible terrorist attack by a Syrian refugee, which has highlighted the necessity that we need to be able to deport criminals who came among the asylum seekers. So we want, you know, what we need is really a possibility to deport those who have been criminal and to integrate the others. So we want to make both. And we just had yesterday, for the first time since the Taliban took over in Afghanistan, we deported 28 Afghan criminals back to Kabul.
Ambassador, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you, Trevor.